So I am an anesthesiologist and critical care medicine resident in my first year. And today I want to talk about the lessons that I learned in medical school. The first lesson I learned about medical school is that you can't succeed if you don't fail at something. And I think that I fell into the trap of constantly choosing something that I was comfortable with and knew that I could excel at, instead of going into the mindset of trying new things. I know this is a difficult balance, and in some ways we are not incentivized to fail at things throughout undergraduate studies. I say that because you have the pre-med track, you have your science GPA, you have your regular GPA, you have the MCAT, and all these things you need to be able to be good at. And so that does not incentivize creative thinking or being adventurous. That's fair. However, I wish I had gone to medical school with the mindset that this is completely out of my comfort zone and I'm going to be constantly pushing myself to be better. As such, it is inevitable that there is something I will fail at. And so when I faced failure for the first time, I almost fell apart because my whole life I had never really been faced with having to deal with it. And I think that I am very grateful I went to medical school because it taught me that lesson to deal with failure and come back even better, because that is really the path to success. There really isn't another way around that. And I think that if I had known that ahead of time, it would have definitely fast-tracked the process of me overcoming setbacks, because setbacks are inevitable. Another thing I'm grateful I learned in medical school is that it really matters for you to put in the time to create a support system, both academically and socially. I state that because the first couple of months of medical school, I tried to go it alone, and honestly, it was an incredibly stressful period of my life. I realized that study tips, resources, how to be more efficient came from people who had friends. It was a bit unavoidable because I ended up in a living situation where I was living with graduate students, but not necessarily with medical students. And so it became a little harder for me to create my own network, and I realized that I had to be proactive with that. And once I did, the study tips, the atmosphere of just being able to have friends to hang out with and just going through the collective stress together is something that I became very grateful for having. And I realized that really, as human beings, we're not meant to be islands. And so we're at our best when we find ourselves in the right group of people who encourage us, challenge us, and expect us to be better in ways. And even when we fall short, they are able to be there to help us pick ourselves up. And to this day, there are a lot of people, you know who I'm talking about, they know themselves, people I really do care about, and I'm still friends with to this day from medical school, that I truly appreciate and I'm incredibly grateful for. Another lesson I learned in medical school is that ask for help even when you don't think you need it. I was fortunate enough to be in medical school that kind of forced you to have an advisor. So even when things were fine, I just go over and talk. And I'm glad I did that, because eventually, if you've learned a theme here, things will not be fine. And you want to be able to talk to someone who has a good sense of who you are, with whom you already have a relationship. I say that because ultimately, it really does matter to be able to reach out for help in case you needed help with something. And ultimately, it doesn't even always have to be academically. I can give you an example of my parents. When COVID happened in the middle of the pandemic, my dad got really sick and he needed help right away. My advisor got in touch with our dean of medicine and had him fast-tracked to the ED to be seen. That is how supported I felt in my medical school. And I remember that day feeling so loved, which is a very strange thing to say about medical school, but it was true for me. And I think that I am incredibly grateful for that support system. But that only happened because I was comfortable enough with my advisor to just talk to her and say, hey, I'm really stressed out, this is what's going on. And instantly, she was there to help. And so, like I said, it's very important to always have help even when you don't think you need it, because trust me, one day you will need it. And the final lesson I learned about being in medical school is that learn to embrace the journey. I was very much the kind of person whose mind was always racing and going for the next best thing and thinking about what I want to do next. Even making these videos, for example, in my mind, it was better off doing it into the future when I actually have more experience, when I'm better prepared, when I'm a real doctor. But I've realized that the journey is really all we have. And so I have learned to not wish away the moment I have in my life, because it really is the way to be present. One of my friends, Madison, she said that, you know, the life we're living now, at one point we used to dream and pray about it. So why not just enjoy it while it's here? The stress will always be there, and there'll be new levels of stress, but learning to enjoy the journey, good and bad, is really how you feel like your life is in fulfillment. And I remember this post from Humans of New York, someone saying that as human beings, if we didn't have watches, we wouldn't really have a way to track time. What we do track is change, the leaves changing, the sun coming up and down. And so you experience more time when you're more present with the changes you undergo. and not try to wish it all away to get to the best parts, because you're already living in that part. I hope you find this incredibly helpful.